Hello everyone, it's Michelle Upton here, and I'm going to show you in this video how I made this happy and joyful Christmas card using a stamp set and matching dies and a die sentiment from the new release at Picket Fence Studios. So holly leaves and holly berries are one of my all-time favourite images to use in Christmas cards. So I'm very, very excited to be using this from the latest release. So I'm using some black hybrid ink from Picket Fence Studios to ink up this image, and I'm going to stamp it multiple times in the same place because I want a really dark, crisp image. You can see it stamped really well the first time, but stamping it the second time just makes it super dark. And you can see I've stamped it multiple times, and now I'm going to use the matching die to cut them all out. Now, once I've cut them all out, I'm then going to do some very simple Copic colouring, and here are the colours that I'm going to use, just an up-close view for you, and I'm going to turn on some music now so you can watch me colouring. So that pretty much finishes up this Copic colouring. You can see I'm not an expert at Copic colouring in any way, shape or form, but I coloured in quite a few images. I'm setting them aside for the time being while I work on my card base. So I'm going to basically create a background that is completely filled with colour. I've got 3 different colours of Distress Oxide inks and my life-changing blender brushes from Picket Fence Studios. And I'm just going to add blotches of colour. So the colours that I have peacock feathers that I'm adding right now. Then I'll move on to Salty Ocean, and then I'll finish off with Blueprint Sketch. So I'm just adding them relatively randomly. I'm not trying to get a really, really smooth blend on this card, because my next step is I'm going to add some flicks of water and sparkle onto this, so it doesn't really need to be smooth. Also, a lot of the background is going to be covered by those holly berries. So the sparkle that I'm adding is from Paper Glitz Sparkle from Picket Fence Studios. And I've basically added it to this spray bottle with water and mixed it up together. And I've pulled out the spray mechanism from this bottle, and I'm just using that to flick little splashes of water and paper glitz all over my background. And that will give me some wonderful sparkle and shine onto this background. Now, this product can actually be added in multiple different ways. This is just one way that you can add it. And it's really great because once it's dried onto your card, it won't rub off. So very good that way. All right, so I'm just going to close my bottle. I'm going to wipe up my work surface. I'm going to dry this a little bit with my heat tool. Just give it a quick zap with my heat tool to make sure all those splashes are dry before I move on to my next step. So I'll just show you up close what all that sparkle looks like. So look at that shine, isn't that great? And move on to thinking about my sentiment. So my sentiment, I'm going to be using this slimline die, which is a word die, Joy to the World. Great sentiment for Christmas. I absolutely love this sentiment on Christmas cards. And I have some white glitter paper here. I'm going to cut this sentiment out from the white glitter paper. Now, as you know, I'm not making a slimline card today, but that's one of the good things about these, a lot of these slimline word dies. Most of them will actually fit on a standard size card as well, especially this one. You've got multiple words in there and you can just stack them on top of each other. So it's really cool that way. Okay, so I'm just going to be using some liquid glue. I'm trying very hard not to add too much liquid glue to these die cuts. I'm notorious for adding way too much glue and having it splodge out the sides, which you'll see me do in just a second. But I'm trying very hard not to do that. And I'm just adhering them to a piece of white vellum here. So I'm going to have these on top of my holly leaves and berries. Now, to make sure I've got the dot on the J just in the right spot, I've just added the negative space that I cut from this die on top of the word joy, and I'm just popping that little dot in place so it's in exactly the right spot. Now I'm just going to fussy cut around these words, leaving a little bit of a border around the letters so that the words sit nicely on the vellum, but the vellum's not going to cover up too much of the card behind it. All right, and now comes the assembly, which did take a while. One, because I just faffed around for so long trying to figure out where these holly leaves and berries were going to go. Seriously, the number of minutes that I actually cut out of this video of just me moving these holly leaves and berries around, it was just, ridiculous. Anyway, eventually we got there. Eventually. And at this point, you might think, oh, well, it's almost done. Easy peasy. However, I'm a glutton for punishment, and I thought, instead of adhering these flat down, what if I added some dimension? I'm a crazy person, honestly. So what I did was I took the sentiment off, I laid down some press and seal, and this press and seal I've used many, many, many times over, so I made sure I pressed really firmly to make sure it was in the right spot. I flipped it over, and then I used my pencil to just trace around the card so I knew exactly where that card was going to go onto those holly leaves and berries. That would allow me to figure out where adhesive needed to go and where it didn't need to go. So I'm just using some liquid adhesive to glue those die cuts together where they overlapped. And now I'm just adding some foam dimensional adhesive, and I'm making sure I just go inside those pencil lines. There's no point in adding any of the dimensional adhesive outside the pencil lines. I'm removing all of the backing tape, all the release paper, and then I'm using those lines that I drew to line up my cardigan. Sorry, my head gets in the way, but you have to get your head in the way to make sure you're lining it up. Now I can remove my press and seal, and I'm just going to cut around the edges to get rid of those excess leaves and berries around the edge. And so I've added those holly leaves and berries sitting up on the card, so it adds a bit more dimension to that card. Now, of course, that means that when I add the sentiment, the letters in the middle of the sentiment are going to be just floating in the middle of that card. They're not going to be adhered to any of those holly leaves or berries. So what I had to do was get some smaller foam adhesive pieces and even cut them in half to fit behind the letters so that it wouldn't be saggy in the middle. You don't want your sentiment to sag in the middle of your card. You want it to be able to hold up if it's going to go through the mail. All right, so I added the foam pieces in the middle to some of those letters. Then I added some liquid adhesive behind the letters around the edge of that piece, and then I could adhere it straight to the card. So then I was finished. So I hope you enjoyed watching me put this card together. I hope you really like these new Christmas products from Picket Fence Studios. Here's a nice up-close view, and thank you very much for watching. Bye.